Now we're being recorded. Namo Om Vishnu Vadaya Krishna Vastai Vitali Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaudavani Vichaline Nevasisha Sunyavari Pashtatara Satanane Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. And just well, it's a bit mundane, but if any of you have the occasion of suffering from hay fever, today I discovered something which helps with hay fever. With hay fever, as I can still hear it within me, I'm sure. But sit in front of a fan, sit close by a fan, then the fan just blows away all the pollen, so you can be free of sneezing. So there you go. Some Monday information. Okay, Hare Krishna. Now let me share my screen, and in that way share the Bhagavatamrta. Anyone can give some context to where we left off last week, last Thursday?
Chapter 2, Gnan and Knowledge, text 170.
170. Oh yeah, that's correct. Now I'm going to take this. Yeah. Okay. Well, it's up on the screen now, so you can probably see the context. The discussion is about moksha, is about liberation, and comparing its value to pure devotional service. And let's try and remember who is having the discussion. I'm asking that as a question because I cannot remember exactly. I think it's the four Kumaras are discussing, I guess, with Gopal Kumar. Let's go back a couple of. We have achieved.
Agamas, we were discussing the discussion between the Agamas and the Kumaras.
Yeah, the Navayagendras, isn't it? The Navayagendras and the four Kumar. Yeah, they're actually discussing amongst themselves. At this point, Gopal Kumar is now a Lord Brahma, isn't it? Or has he left that post?
I think he's still Brahma.
He's still Brahma, just going back. Oh, yeah, actually, no. Mother Sahacharya is correct. It's a discussion amongst the different scriptures, yes. Here we have Srimad Bhagavatam, Sattva Siddhanta, and other Agamas. So the Shrutis and the Vedas, all the different Pacific Vedas, they're actually discussing amongst themselves. And I think at one point, Srimad Bhagavatam and other scriptures walk out of the discussion at some point. I can't exactly recall the exact details why they did that, but then they join the conversation again. So the conversation, yeah, thank you, Mother Sahacharya, you're correct. It's a conversation which Gopal Kumar is hearing, or he's questioning, yeah, different scriptures. So this is where we left off. So I saw Mother Sahacharya, you had your hand raised. You can begin today's auspicious reading of Shri Brhad Bhagavatamrta.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Text 170. Kavachit prastute ye sambher bhagavad bhakti taparai moksha tyajayitum samyak vinidyasa prayichada. We who are dedicated to the personality of Godhead's devotional service may sometimes discuss liberation, but only to encourage people to reject it completely. When we speak of liberation, we condemn it and everything that goes with it. Commentary. The Bhakti Shastras has no business promoting liberation, but sometimes they do describe it because people generally cannot give up attachment to something unless scientifically taught why it is undesirable. When the Bhakti Shastras speak of liberation, they criticize attachment to liberation for its own sake, and attachment to gnana and the other impersonal means of striving for liberation. Text 171. To describe the ultimate glories of devotional service, we may sometimes speak highly of moksha, liberation. But We do not intend to acclaim moksha, the final goal of spiritual discipline, because in moksha there is not even a trace of real happiness. Commentary. In some passages of the Bhakti Shastras, the joy found in liberation is described as being greater than any happiness in material life. The Shastras provide this information to contrast the joy of liberation with the joy of pure devotional service, which is billions of times more intense. Other than the joy of liberation, nothing can be meaningfully compared with the joy of bhakti. Properly speaking, however, the concept of joy in liberation is only a theatrical creation of the impersonalists. As the Bhakti Shastras declare in this verse, in liberation, there is not even a trace of real happiness.
Okay,
Text 172.
pause there. So this is described in the Nectar of Devotion as well by Rupa Goswami. He gives the different definitions of happiness, and he describes about material happiness, which is very flickering. And he speaks about the happiness which is derived from moksha or liberation, and how it doesn't compare practically with the happiness, with the bliss that's experienced in pure devotional service. We had Bhagavat Maharaj. I remember he gave the example. I remember that's just like if someone is in prison and they finally get released from prison. But that's not the end of the story. What do you do when you get released from prison? Yeah. Then you go to the nearest park, or you do whatever you've always been dreaming of doing with the new sense of freedom. So that's actual devotional service, is the activities that you do engage in once you're free from the binds of material existence. So, but here, in comparison to bhakti, it's just a theoretical creation of the impersonalist. So practically speaking, it isn't joy at all compared to that which is experienced in a devotional service. So it's just a theoretical creation. So that's a bit of a dig at the so-called impersonalist moksha. Yeah? So yeah, in liberation, there is not even a trace of real happiness. So this is the first thing I'm hearing this in the way it's described like this. In Nectar of Devotion, described that there is a sense of happiness, but here it's described as not a trace of it. Because it's been compared with pure devotion. So in comparison to that, there ain't a trace of happiness in being free from material world. Yeah, just put that. All right, you can continue reading unless any questions or comments. And again, excuse my sniffing and snorting.
Okay. The so-called happiness of liberation may be compared to the happiness of not being sick or the enjoyment of deep sleep. In fact, the very term liberation is a misnomer created by illusion, and it appeals only to the ignorant. Commentary. As the scriptures like to do, they here support their proposition with analogies. Simply being free from the pain of disease is not positive happiness, nor is there happiness in deep sleep, which is nothing but a condition of ignorance. One only imagines that in deep sleep one is happy because in that sleep one is free for a while from the mind's flight of fancy and from dreams and other agitations. One thinks, I slept happily, unaware of anything. In the same way, one only imagines that there is happiness in liberation, a state of apparent voidness in which birth, death, and the other pains of material existence are not perceived. People praise liberation only because they are unaware of the facts. The very term liberation is a misnomer, as Lord Brahma states in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam 10:14-26. The conception of material bondage and that of liberation are both signs of ignorance. They lie outside the scope of true knowledge. They cease to exist when one correctly knows that the pure spirit soul is distinct from matter and always fully conscious. Bondage and liberation then no longer have any meaning. Just as day and night mean nothing for the sun. Text 173. From even a shadow of the Lord's names, if one somehow chants them but once, or if they barely enter the ears, liberation is easily attained. Commentary. If even after hearing how the previous verse defines liberation, one still wants to know the meaning to attain it, from the present statement, one can learn that devotees of the personality of Godhead achieve liberation without separate endeavor as a mere byproduct of the practice of bhakti. Furthermore, one's service to the holy name of the Lord need not even be pure. Simply, namabhas, the shadow of chanting the Lord's names, earns one's liberation. Namabhas resembles the shadow of a real object in the world. One kind of namabhas is the unintentional uttering, in jest, contempt, or other modes of neglect of sounds that contain the same syllables as Lord Vishnu's name. Chanting or hearing namabhas even once results in liberation. This is stated in the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam 6.3.24. It should be therefore be understood that one is easily relieved from all sinful reactions by chanting the holy name of the Lord and chanting of his qualities and activities. This is the only process recommended for relief from sinful reactions. Even if one chants the holy name of the Lord with improper pronunciation, he will achieve relief from material bondage if he chants without offenses. Ajamil, for example, was extremely sinful, but while dying, he merely chanted the holy name, and although calling his son, he achieved complete liberation because he remembered the name of Narayan. Also, at the beginning of the history of Satyatapa, Sri Varaha Purana 38:20 tells us of a tiger that once approached a Brahmana who was busy chanting japa while standing in water. The tiger wanted to eat the Brahmana, but at that very moment the tiger was killed by a hunter. And because of hearing the names of the Supreme Lord from the mouth of the Brahmana, the tiger was liberated.
Yeah, just
Text 174.
Yeah. Point here. Nectar Devotion spends quite a lot of time. There's quite a few verses in the Nectar Devotion where it makes a comparison between liberation and devotional service, and it's highlighting it because, well, let me go back a bit, because for us, we may not have been consciously searching out moksha or liberation, coming from or being brought up or mainly in the Western type of mindset. But in India, practically speaking, every spiritual organization, that's what they are obsessed with, obtaining moksha. Yeah. In India, that's the goal of their existence. At least those who are somewhat on the path of transcendence, Gandhis. So that's why it's spoken of quite a bit. I mean, liberation wasn't on my mind when I took to Krishna consciousness. It wasn't something I had to struggle with. Choosing between moksha and Krishna consciousness, I didn't even know there was such a thing as liberation from material suffering. You get the point I'm trying to make? So it's just, I don't know if anyone has any comments on that, but the reason it's being mentioned because other than a pure devotional service, all other spiritual practices, they are aiming at moksha. That's why Rupa Goswami, I think he describes it as we should be aware of the witches, of desires of the witch to enjoy oneself from the activities of bhakti in a selfish way, also and to obtain, or the desire for moksha. He compares it to two black witches, which we have to make sure we don't get influenced by. Anyway, just sort of, but how does sorry, I keep on asking questions, but how can we relate to not desiring liberation? What can be a trap that sometimes devotees fall into?
I'm tired of
miseries in this world.
Yeah, that's it. That we just want to be free of suffering.
Sorry, we can
Yeah.
always change it to higher intelligence by thinking that, okay, I'm suffering, but I'm washing my karmas, which is
Okay,
more
yeah.
important.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I was thinking also more that, we have to, we kind of suffer under the stringent laws of the three modes of material nature. So sometimes even as devotees, then we may desire just to be free of suffering, and Krishna may not be in the equation. So that means that we want moksha. We just want to end suffering. But actually, we want Krishna. And if Krishna makes us suffer, very good. If Krishna wishes to put us in a difficult situation, very good. So we want Krishna, and whatever comes as a consequence of that, happiness or distress, it's all Krishna's. It is all Krishna's mercy. So, yeah, sorry, Mabachandra, will I cut you off there?
No, okay. I was just thinking, I asked that to Bhakti Chiru Maharaj once, how Rishikesh was always ill and things like that.
Okay, yeah.
And then I'd go in front of deities, and sometimes you literally do take darshan and you feel really like crying because they're so beautiful. But then he said that as long as you're not going there in front of the deities and, really feeling like that because you're suffering, So
Yeah.
I was talking
Like,
to him, he said to me.
Yes, very good point. Like I don't know how many times now, and also as head pujari, and even now, I get people coming to ask me for them to pray for them. What do they ask me to pray for? Moksha. They want liberation. They want freedom from some particular type of stress and anxiety. They don't pray, oh, please can you pray to Krishna to give me as much stress as possible so I can take shelter of his lotus feet. It's normally some type of, moksha.
How do we answer? Somebody please pray for me for moksha. How do we answer that? Or how do we go in front of the deities? I mean, I would normally go and chant some Hare Krishna or something, forget about praying for them. Just I'm praying for you.
I haven't had people come and directly ask me to pray for them to obtain moksha, but they approach me for being, so materially things can go nice, or just pray for me because I'm struggling at the moment, and I want to not struggle. So I'm just gracious, and I smile and I say, yes, okay, Hare Krishna. And then if I do remember to pray, which is not very often, but if I do remember, then I cheat a bit, and I kind of offer the prayer that they can take shelter of Krishna's lotus feet. And I pray like that. Please, Krishna, please you bring them to shelter of your lotus feet. I don't present it in the same way that they asked,
Yeah, thank you. I do the same.
Yeah, so do the same. Yeah. So we have,
them to you.
yeah, because they ask you as well, because you're cooks for the deities and you're pujaris, and they see you, so they will ask you. So I know Pankaj Janri and Janani Vas, they would write down lists of all the names of everyone who asked them to pray for them. As far as I know, they would take it on the altar as well. I mean, one time, sorry, going off track a bit. One time I was in Mayapur, and I think Pankaj Janri was giving class, or Janani Vas, and normally he does. The devotees will ask them to do the last rites for their parents or relatives who passed away, and then he got offered. Some Chinese devotees came and asked him to do the last rites for their cat. Their cat that passed away. And then Janani Vasi's brother spoke up. Yes, they asked me as well. And I think they'd done it as well. They've been gracious. My point I'm making is that you often see they go on the altar even now for Lord Sringadev, and they have a long list of names who they're praying for. Anyway, we should pray for whatever it takes, my Lord, to bring me to your lotus feet. but please give me the strength to sustain it. Yeah. Okay.
You know, when you pray,
Liberation.
like,
Go on,
it's
Mother.
okay, Satyari, you go.
Go on.
No. Liberation means you can go up only up to Vaikuntha planets. That is not our destination, right?
No, that's liberation means, as far as I can understand. Well, there is a form. Yeah, there is a form of liberation, but we're aiming for Goloka. But generally, Gyanis want to be liberated and kind of enter into the Brahman, enter into some type of suspension of existence. You know, they want moksha. They just want freedom. They just want to escape, whatever form that may take, even if it's an impersonal type of liberation. But Vaikuntha, that's there. You go to serve Krishna. You go to serve Vishnu. Yeah. So, but basically, basically, if they not got any affection or love for Vishnu and desire to serve him in awe and reverence, if they're just desiring moksha and it's not related to affection or love for Vishnu, then they won't go to Vaikuntha. They will go to some impersonal type of suspension. Vimuktamaninas. Yeah. Okay. Someone else was going to say something there. Yeah.
I was going to ask, like, you know, when we're praying for family, friends, or people we know,
Yeah.
and then you realize, you know, I always remember that Vasudev Dutt, you know, in
Yeah.
Chaitanya Charitamrita.
Yes.
So I always also go along like all living entities, you know, like I pray along like that. Is that
That's nice.
okay?
Yeah, that's nice. That's like that. That is compassion. That's the prayer of Prahlad Maharaj. May all living entities be pacified. May they be free of envy. There's one nice prayer that Prahlad Maharaj. Yes, this is Vaishnava. This is compassion. Yes. Okay. Let's read a couple more verses, unless there's any other comments on this. But you can read one more verse. Mother Sahachari, there's a couple, well, not so many hands, but you can read next verse.
Okay. Text
Two
174.
verses. Yeah. 1, 2.
Liberation. Yeah. Liberation, please understand, is attractive to those whose discrimination is poor. This is evident even from the opinions of the same Vedas, Puranas, and other scriptures that the proponents of liberation accept as authorities. Commentary. In philosophical debates, opposing sides from different schools of thought unavoidably base their opinions on their own assumptions. Buddhists, for example, assume that everything is but momentary and thus unreal, while the logicians of the Gautama school assume that whatever has perceivable qualities is real. A debate is effective when each side, rather than fight over these assumptions, accepts for the sake of argument the assumptions of the other side and works out their own arguments from that starting point. It is in this sense that the Bhakti Shastra accept the scriptural statements yogis cite in the support of their conviction, and that impersonal liberation is the final goal of life. Text 175.
Did anyone understand that? I didn't. I'm looking at it again. So philosophical debates. So there's different. They unavoidable base their opinions on their own assumptions. So the Buddhists, they have one understanding, and the followers of Gautama, they have another. A debate is effective when each side, rather than fighting over their assumptions, for the sake of, I guess it's quite self-explanatory, they accept the assumptions of the other side as a starting point. Okay, so I guess you're saying, yes, okay, what do you say? It seems like it has some value or some point, but now let's describe bhakti. I think that's what's being described as a way to debate. Oh, so there's a word in debate. There's something called in Naya. There's a word for debate where you're just like throwing stones at each other. There's a word. You know, you're not actually having a conversation and sharing points to come to a higher understanding. You're just like, I forget the word for it. You're just becoming tangled in arguments for argument's sake. But here it is in this sense that the Bhakti Sastras accept the scriptural statements yogis cite in support of their conviction that impersonal liberation is the goal of life. So I hope I'm not overcomplicating it. But you understand? It seems like this is a place to start, find some common ground, and then move on and bring in higher principles rather than say, you nonsense, what are you speaking about? You got no idea. No, so the yogis glorify moksha or liberation. Anyway. Okay, carry on. So
One thing, say in this case, Buddhist and Gautam school. So their thoughts are different, right?
yeah,
So they're going to comment on their own philosophy in their own way, what they know.
yeah.
So isn't it like we don't disturb, like,
Okay.
whoever's following whatever, but try and give them,
More.
yeah, this
Yeah,
time
that's a good way to look at it. Yeah.
in a different way, because if you're going to sit there arguing, if my thoughts are like moksha, right, and yours aren't, and then you try and tell me, but I've already got that frame of mind, this is what I want. It's not, so you have to turn it around in a way that I come round.
Yeah, that's a very good
Like
point,
if
actually. And
something,
yeah,
like come out with an example of something, and then, oh, maybe I will think about this, and then kind of subtly change,
yeah, that's how Krishna, that's the logic that Krishna gives in Bhagavad Gita, where don't disturb the minds of those who are ignorant, but instead
Yeah.
engage them in acts of devotion, where their Krishna consciousness can gradually be aroused. Yeah, thanks for bringing that out. So, yeah, often, I mean, Bhakti Shiviras, they're very expert. If you meet a Buddhist or you meet someone of another philosophy, you glorify their philosophy. You know, they will say, oh, I'm a Buddhist, and you say, oh, that's very nice. Oh, very nice. This book also explained, you present it like you're not trying to change their point of view, you're not trying to challenge it. Sometimes that might be needed. It might need to be done. But then if you're expert book distributors, they will always do that. If they meet a Christian or Buddhist, a Christian, if they're open to conversation, or Buddhist, you don't meet many followers of Gautama on book distribution. But you persons, yeah, that's how then you make friends with them, and often devotees, often book distributors book, sometimes they tell kind of white lies. Yeah, this book, it's a it's Srimad Bhagavatam, part 1, and it's, yeah, this book tells you about the chakras, yeah, you're into chakras, yeah, this book's got it all in there, the different chakras. It's got no, like that. Yes, thank you, Mother Chandravati. Very good point. Okay, unless there's any more points, Mother Shachari, you can read text 175, then we'll call him Mother Rajakishore.
Okay. Moksha, liberation, is the removal of all misery, or the stopping of illusory activities, or the self-realization that comes from abandoning the false identities created by Maya. Commentary. These three alternative definitions of moksha, taken from various shastras, are adhered to by those who strive for liberation. The logicians of Gautama Nyaya school hold that liberation is the removal of all kinds of misery, which they count as 21. As the followers of Gautama say, Atyantiki dukkha nivrittir mukti. Liberation is the complete stoppage of suffering. A section of the Vedanta school says that Liberation is the ceasing of illusion, and thus of activity from which suffering comes about. And another party of impersonal Vedantists, the illusionists, Vivratavadis, define liberation as rejecting the false identity produced by the power of illusion, and thus realizing oneself to be one with Brahman. The Vivratavadis further describe the false identity of the illusion soul in terms of dualities and the cycle of life and death. These impersonalists sometimes cite Srimad Bhagavatam 2.10.6 as the source of their definition. Muktir hitvantya rupam swarupena vyavastiti. Liberation means to give up other identities and assume one's true essential identity.
Yes. Okay. Hare Krishna. I was just thinking of that verse and then it came up, quoted at the end. Mukti hitvanyata rupam swarupena vyavastiti. Prabhupada would often quote this verse. It seems like the impersonalists will quote this verse. It seems like they do. It's mentioned here. But actually, this verse is quite significant because here it's trying, liberation means giving up the other identities and assuming one's true identity. But the translation that Prabhupada gives is liberation means to give up, is existence beyond the gross and subtle bodies. So it's indicating a spiritual body. Yeah, liberation means to give up the gross and subtle bodies and obtain one's true spiritual identity. But the impersonalists, as they want to do, they screw an impersonalist interpretation from this statement from the Bhagavatam, as if it's some type of stamping out of one's individuality. Any comments? It's quite technical, this part, isn't it? Quite. Of course, it will be technical because it's the scriptures are speaking with each other. So, yeah. Vivartavad. Forget that. Vivartavad, as far as I know, it's a term that means transformation, or is that I can't think of it. But false identity of the illusion soul in terms of the dualities of cycle and birth and death. Anyway, so there's no mention of joining Krishna's pastimes. There's no mention of serving Krishna. It's just completely absent in their conversation. You know? Yeah. Okay, Mother Rajkishore, you'd like to take us from 176.
Text 176. The happiness that arises from directly perceiving the true identity of the jiva, soul, the entity composed of eternity, knowledge, and bliss, is actually meager. Commentary, the moksha or the liberation conceived in the first two ideas cited above, moksha as the end of the misery or as the end of the causes of the misery, affords no positive happiness. Furthermore, the happiness of self-realization presumed in the third theory of moksha, that of vivrat, is meager, as the Bhakti Shastras in text 176 through 196 now set out to prove. Compared to the bliss of performing pure devotional service and realizing the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead, who embodies all the perfections of Brahman, realizing the identity of the jiva soul, brings very little happiness. In fact, this so-called happiness of self-realization is nothing more than the negation of suffering. The scriptures refer to it as happiness only as a concession to the foolish. But at least the happiness of perceiving the jiva soul serves as a standard of comparison by which to think of the joy of pure devotional service to the Supreme Lord.
Okay.
Text 177.
Okay. Yeah, often a lot of the verses in the Bhagavad Gita, they speak in this language, like the verses we're reading at the moment. to be tranquil, to not be to be tranquil, to be self-satisfied, to be free from the dualities of the world. As often a lot of the language of Bhagavad Gita is presented in this way. Only through a proper study of the Bhagavad Gita will you be able, thanks to Srila Prabhupada, then you can actually conclude that it's devotion which is the thing to be aspired for. Anyway, here, that's why he says here, this language is used. Nothing more than negation from suffering, but the scriptures refer to as happiness only as a concession to the foolish. But at least their happiness of perceiving the jiva soul is a standard comparison by which to think of the joy of pure devotional service to the Supreme Lord. So sometimes we use it and we quote the verses about self-satisfaction. And this is where, for instance, the preaching of Radhanath Swami Maharaj, this is how he preaches to people, yogis. This is his presentation to attract them to bhakti in his expert way. If you hear Radhanath Swami speak at a yogi gathering in the Himalayas, it's all going to be about concepts of moksha and freedom from duality, compassion for all, love for mankind, But these are all symptoms that come from bhakti, really. But Maharaj, in his expert, Maharaj will not present it completely as devotion to God. At some point he does, and he brings it in. It depends on the situation. But a lot of his preaching is aimed at these type of misidentifications. So he will speak in that language. And it's very attractive as well. And I'm sure he's making many devotees like that. But he's speaking about, as it says here, the standard comparison by which to think of the joy of pure devotional service to the Supreme Lord. So that's a preaching technique. Any comments on that? Sometimes he's criticized, actually, for preaching like that. He didn't mention Krishna. He didn't say anything about Krishna. Something about his criticized, But let's just wait. Let's see what he's doing. He's very intelligently laying out a path for them to accept Krishna. Well, it's a big discussion, but any comments on that? We don't want to start a controversial conversation, but okay. Carry on, Mother. 177.
177. That entity, the reality of pure life, is called Brahman. It is devoid of qualities, free from attachment, unchanging, and inactive. Commentary. The impersonalist might now suggest that in contrast to the small happiness of realizing the minute jiva, the relish of perceiving the impersonal supreme in liberation is unlimited. However, the Bhakti Shastris here point out that the Vivaratavadi's own definition.
Look up that word. Carry on.
Vivaratavadi's own definition, the supreme leaves little room in Brahman realization for happiness. According to them, Brahman is devoid of qualities such as a compassion. It has no attachment to anything or anyone, including the pure Vaishnavas. It undergoes no changes, such as the transformations of a heart melting in the ecstasy of love, and displays none of the dynamic varieties of opulence and sweetness shown by the Supreme Lord in his personal form. It is also inactive, which implies that it has no wonderful, attractive pastimes. Thus, the happiness of realizing Brahman cannot transcend the limits of impersonalism. Text 178.
Yeah, here's a definition of vivata, so we can see why it's being used. The word vivatavad. The word is merely, so this is what it means. The world is merely an unreal manifestation. Vivata. It is not real. Yeah, it's just all illusion. Yeah. So the world is merely an unreal manifestation, vivata. So vivata means manifestation of Brahman. Vivatavad states that although Brahman appears to undergo a transformation, so therefore you see forms, you see substance, you see shapes, you see trees, you see people. So they see that as a transformation of Brahman. In fact, no real change takes place. The myriad of beings are unreal manifestation, as the only real being is Brahman, that ultimate reality which is unborn, unchanging, and entirely without parts. So Maya, Vadi, impersonal. So that's Vivatavad. It's just an illusory transformation of Brahman. And when you obtain moksha, you will realize that everything is Brahman and there is no distinction. Blah, blah, blah. Okay.
Text
Transformation.
178.
Yeah.
But the personality of Godhead is a supreme Brahman, the super soul, the absolute controller of everything. His body is a concentrated essence of eternity, knowledge, and bliss. He is an ocean of superlative qualities.
Jai.
Commentary.
Jai. Now we're hearing about something substantial. Yeah.
Commentary. Substantial happiness is not to be found in the impersonal conception of Supreme, but rather in pure devotional service to the Supreme, to the personality of Godhead. He is a complete absolute truth, Param Brahma. He is also the Supreme Soul, the indwelling controller who regulates everyone's consciousness. As such, he is the ultimate controller of everything, the ruler of even Brahma and all the other demigods. And as the Lord of Vaikuntha, he is the most concentrated manifestation of eternity, knowledge, and bliss, which constitute his transcendental body. He is an ocean, steady, deep, and infinitely wide, of countless inconceivable and amazing perfections. When the Bhakti Shastras refer to the full personal concept of the absolute truth, the term normally used is Parabrahma or Param Brahma, as in Bhagavad Gita 10:12. Param Brahma, Param Dhama, Pavitram Paramam Bhavan. You are the supreme Brahman, the supreme abode, the supreme purifier. When the spiritual reality is indicated in more generic sense, it is usually called simply Brahma, as again in Bhagavad Gita 14:27, Brahmano hi pratishtha aham. I am the foundation of the absolute. Srimad Bhagavatam also says, how can the Ved directly describe the supreme absolute truth, who cannot be described in words? O Brahmana, the Vedas are limited to describing the qualities of material nature. But the supreme is devoid of all qualities, being transcendental to all material manifestations and their causes. When the adjective param is seen with the term Brahma, it may occasionally be intended to distinguish Brahma, the supreme truth, from the Vedic sound, which is also called Brahma.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone's read the Mahabharata. Well, probably a lot of you have read the Mahabharata by Krishna Dharma, but the Mahabharata itself is quite a substantial work. It's Krishna Dharma's wonderful work is just like a few pages of the actual Mahabharata. But the Mahabharata, it just speaks of Brahman. It never speaks about God direct, never speaks about Krishna. And as he speaks, there's hundreds of conversations with different sages, and they refer in an indirect way. At least the one that I've read is Brahman. How can one attain the Brahman? What is the Brahman? And the sages will describe what is Brahman. You know, it's only when you get Mahabharata and you get Bhagavad Gita, you get Kurukshetra, then you get Bhagavad Gita, then Para Brahman's mentioned. Other than that, it's all just Brahman. To obtain the Brahman. Anyway, sorry for interrupting. Hare Krishna. Continue.
Text 179. Contrary natures, like having qualities and having no qualities, conjoin in him. Since impersonal Brahman is an infinite opulence of the personality of Godhead, the difference between him and Brahman is well established. Commentary. As rivers merge into an ocean, many opposite qualities converge in the Supreme Person. The word Adi after Sagunatva and Agunatva indicate more opposites: detachment and association, changelessness and change, inactivity and endeavor, oneness and multiplicity, non-duality and specific qualities. Conceived as impersonal Brahman, the Supreme is devoid of the qualities and other dualities. Conceived as Paramatma and Parmeshwar, the Supreme displays characteristics such as having relationships with other living beings, possessing wonderful qualities, and so on. Thus, in truth, the Supreme is full of qualities, many of them apparently contradictory. Shastra may sometimes say that the Supreme cannot be described in words and that he has no name, but the literal construction of these statements are refuted by the Vasudevadhyatma. Because his qualities are not well known, he is said to have no name. And because his form is not material, he is said to have no form. Mayavadis argue that the personality of Godhead may have qualities, but as products of Maya, those qualities are illusory. Thus, we want to reconcile his having qualities with their ideas of reality, that the supreme actuality has no qualities. In fact, however, the supreme powers of the absolute truth are eternal and real, not illusory like the material creation. And therefore, when the personal feature of the Supreme Bhagavan is said to be Nirguna, like Brahman, the sense is different, namely that Bhagavan transcends all material qualities. At the same time, like the material world, he has many different qualities, and so he is also said to be Saguna. This seems contradictory, but it is possible by his inconceivable, amazing potencies. The Supreme Person is indeed Mahi Marnava, the ocean in which all perfections converge. This is confirmed in many Shastras. In the words of the Moksha Dharma, Mahabharat Shanti Parva 3:31, 10, 11.
Oh, I'm just being here. This verse is proving me wrong. There's a quote directly about the Supreme Lord here on the Mahabharata. Go on.
O ruler of people, whatever you see in the world is connection with the material body of the living entities. Whatever you see composed of the 5 elements born from the intelligence of the Supreme Lord, know all that to be the Supreme Lord himself, both possessing qualities and having none. He is the ultimate element of all creation, the Supreme Master, the body of the universe, Lord Narayan. Try to understand him to be the inner self of all creatures.
Yeah, in the convo, I guess it's the particular translation I'm reading. It's I also forget his name. But obviously, he's not a devotee 7%, because the translation they give will be, "Oh, all of the people, whatever you see in this world is a connection with the material bodies of the living entities. Whatever you see composed of the 5 elements is born from the intelligence of the Supreme Brahman." That's what they say. Know that all to be all that be to be the Supreme Brahman himself, both possessing qualities and having none. He is the ultimate. Brahman is the ultimate element of all creation, the Supreme Master, the body of the universe. Lord Narayan, Brahman, he gives, like that. So I guess I should read a proper translation of Mahabharata. Any questions on this or comments? As you know, it's a favorite sport of the Vaishnavas to take to pieces the impersonal philosophy. That's right. It's been mentioned here. You can carry on with it. Yeah.
Yeah. He is neither large nor infinitesimal, yet he is larger and smaller than everything else. He is said to be devoid of color, yet he is dark blue, and the corners of his eyes are reddish. By the play of his personal powers, the Supreme Lord is known as contradictory designations, yet he is a supreme and faults should never be ascribed to him. In him, all contrary qualities combined, and in the Vishnu Dharmotra Purana, all qualities joined together in the Supreme Person by the virtue of his transcendental powers, yet no faults ever enter him, for he is the absolute. Some persons who are not truly learned say that good qualities and faults exist in the Supreme Lord by the force of Maya, but in him there is no Maya, nor any agent who could possess Maya. How then could he have illusory good qualities and faults that Maya could produce? The opulence of the Supreme Lord are not therefore generated by the force of illusion. The Lord transcends Maya, and so he is known as the Supreme. All this will be more elaborately explained later on. Although the impersonal Brahman and the personality of Godhead are but different conceptions of the same absolute truth, some think otherwise. They think that Brahman, the Lord's formless aspect, worshipped by the yogis, is one entity, and that his form, possessing personal qualities and worshipped by his devotees, is a different entity. But although the Mayavadis think that the Sagun Brahman is not as real as Nirgun Brahman, they still have to admit that the Sagun aspect of the Supreme is a concentrated, eternal essence of pure existence, Shuddha Sattva. Therefore, even in their opinion, the Sagun form of the Lord is superior to everything else that has form. That personal form is realized by the Lord's unalloyed devotee, but remains invisible to the person striving to realize impersonal Brahman. In addition, the personal aspect of the Supreme has special, unique excellencies, such as his distributing the
Distributing
the topmost ecstasy of prema. How the Lord selectively reveals himself is shown in a narrative of the Sri Narayaniya of the Moksha Dharma, where Upachar Vasu performs a sacrifice in which he, but not Bruhaspati and others, is able to see the personality of Godhead, accepting his shares of offering. Another vivid example appears in the history of Brahma's son, Ekta, Dvita, and Trita, all great yogis who went to Svetadvip to see the Supreme Lord. Even after intense endeavor, they were unable to have his audience. But although Sri Shanak and his brothers were constantly perceiving Brahman and were the most elevated of the self-contented sages, when they visited Sri Vaikuntha, they did see the personality of Godhead, and the ecstasy they felt was so powerful that various transformations became manifest in them. This same incident is described in the 3rd canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. When the breeze carrying the aroma of tulsi leaves from the toes of the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead entered the nostrils of those sages, they experienced a change both in the body and in mind, even though they were attached to the impersonal Brahman understanding. The conclusion is that supreme features of Brahman and the Jiva soul are two of the personality of Godhead's opulent expansions, as many authoritative sources confirm. For example, according to one saying by saintly devotees, Parata Param Brahmacha Te Vibhutaya. The supreme truth, Brahman, is also one of your vibhutis, O Lord. In Bhagavad Gita 10:20, Sri Krishna includes the soul as one of his vibhutis. Aham Atma Gudakesha Sarva Bhutashaya Sthita. O conqueror of sleep, I am the soul situated in the hearts of all living beings. Sri Brahma Samhita also states, I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is endowed with the great power.
This is a long purple. Carry on. Carry on.
The glowing effulgence of his transcendental form is the impersonal Brahman, which is absolute, complete, and unlimited, and which displays the varieties of countless planets with their different opulences in millions and millions of universes. In other words, Brahman is a supreme personal's partial expansion.
Okay,
And
let's just pause there. There's another couple of pages left here of this purple, or 2 pages. We can pick it up. So just wanted to ask you a testing question and then conclude with a famous verse from Chaitanya Charitamrita. So let me put a bookmark here. 1 second. Bookmark. Dink. Yes, okay. So you see this, does anyone can tell us the pastime or give us some context of this verse here? Who were those sages?
The 4 Kumars, Sanat,
Yes.
Sanatan.
Correct. Well done. 10 points. Hare Krishna. Yes. And the basic story of that?
They paid a visit to Vishnu Lok.
Yes.
The doorkeepers stopped them. Jai and Vijay stopped them.
Yeah.
And thinking something else will happen, Lord Vishnu came himself outside.
Yeah.
And the tulsi leaves on his feet. The smell.
They smell. And they felt a change in both body and mind. So yeah, that's where this is coming from. The sages are the 4 Kamaras. When they tried to enter Vaikuntha, and they were stopped at this one of the gates, 7th, I think, by Jai and Vijay. Then the Lord came and they saw the Lord and became devotees at that point on. They become devoted to his personal form. And there's a famous verse in Chaitanya Charitamrita, which I was thinking it might come up. It probably will do. Atmaramas chai munayo nigranti api kuvartuke hoitikimitam bhaktim itam putukuno hari. Know this verse that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gives like 64 different meanings to, or with Sharvabhauma and also somewhere else. All varieties of Atmaramas, even those who are freed from all affinities to the material world, become attracted to Krishna. This means that the Lord has transcendental body and can attract even those who are free from all material affinity. So that means if they become attracted to Krishna, he is above everything. He's above the impersonal conception. Anyway, that's the Atmaramastamanayo, very famous verse. All right, let's stop there in mid-purple and we'll pick it up next week. What's the date? Yeah, we'll pick it up next week. Hare Krishna. Any final comments from anyone? Okay, I wish you a very blissful weekend. There's a few things happening this weekend. We have Saturday, 3:30, Indradruma Swami Maharaj is doing Harinam. And then in the evening, I heard that Krishna Setra Maharaj is doing Harinam Saturday. Come for that. Anything else going on the weekend? Anyone know of any other events? Any?
Prabhuji, Indra Swamiji Maharaj is coming to Crawley Bhakti Yoga Center on Sunday.
Wow. So
Yeah.
anyone who's near Crawley?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you say? Sorry?
Anyone who's near Crawley or can go there then on Sunday?
I live in Crawley. I go to Bhakti Yoga Center on Sunday.
Which is the time? What's the time?
5 o'clock, 5 until 9.
Okay. So those can go there. Go to Crawley, past Gatwick Airport, 3 bridges.
Yes.
Crawley and then Crawley.
Yes.
Anything else going on in the weekend? Anyone know?
I think Jayapataka Maharaj is doing something in.
Really?
Yeah, I think this weekend.
UK.
Saying,
He's here? Wow, my God.
Yeah, someone was saying, but I don't really know much details, but I remember.
Okay. Anyway, I can find that out. So lots going on. And Hare Krishna, have a wonderful weekend and look forward to our Sangha on Monday. Hare
His
Krishna,
Grace
Srila
Murli
Prabhupada
Prabhuji
ki
ki
jai.
jai. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna,
Thank
Hare
you,
Krishna,
Prabhu.
Krishna
Hare
Krishna, Hare
Krishna.
Hare.
Hare
Hare Ram, 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 Ram,
Ram,
Hare
Hare
Hare.
Hare.
Hare
Thank